Hello everyone, I'm down here at the Milwaukee River, just next to Hubbard Park in Shorewood, Wisconsin, not too far away from the university. I want to try and bring this into our discussion on outlining today. I'm also wearing a funny glove, which you will often see me do when I'm typing on my computer, because I have done a little bit of damage to my hand the last 2 decades from typing too much. So whatever, this helps my hand feel better, and you can make the Michael Jackson or O.J. Simpson jokes all you want, I don't really care. Anyways, I'm really happy to be outside here today. I hope you've got a chance to get out and enjoy the weather yourself. And because it's such a perfect day, I want to cover something that has to deal with community concern just by being out here next to this waterway. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about outlining here, and I'm going to try and make it as simple as possible. The book has a lot of information in this week's chapters, so I hope you'll look at them to help you create your outlines. I'll also, as I type out part of a sample outline here, I will provide that to you in the content page along with another outline that's more complete, so you have some exemplars to go by. And there's a lot of different patterns of organizations that we can tackle when we're outlining. We have to figure out what's going to be best for us, and that usually begins by figuring out what exactly your purpose is going to be for your speech. I've cheated a little bit. I've got some stuff written out that I'm going to cut and paste in here as we go. But today I want to talk to you about what's happened in Lake Michigan and its tributaries, rivers that feed it, as far as fish population goes. And we do know that overfishing over the last century really decimated the fish population in Lake Michigan. And that did a lot of things where it took away income revenue, it took away tourism, it took away people's ability to feed themselves. So the problem I want to tackle, if I'm going to do my speech of community concern, is right here. To inform my audience how the Wisconsin DNR is helping to repopulate Lake Michigan's fish populations. Now, the interesting thing about this particular speech that we're working on is beyond being a community concern, we need to solve that community concern. And since we're still in the informative round of public speaking, we're not giving our audience a way of going to solve it. We're informing our audience about what's wrong, and then we're going to find out how our community is helping to solve that problem. And you can see that very clearly here in my thesis statement. Certainly, we begin by thinking about problems, which you did this last week in your discussion. You came up with a couple of very interesting problems, things that are bothering you, things that you see in our community that really have troubled you. And part of your task this week, and I'll explain that here a little bit more in depthly as we go on, is to find solution to those problems. I guess we'll just talk about it right now. What I want you to do for this week's discussion is to go back into last week. I want you to grab those two topics you were talking about, post them right into this week's discussion. And your task is to find out what our community is doing to help solve those problems. Now, what your classmates can do, and we can include that a little bit later, but more specifically and more appropriately, what is the community doing to solve these problems? I've got that written into my thesis statement. That's already set up for us. But we know we need to find a problem to discuss, and that problem is very simple. Lake Michigan has lost most of its large fish population. Now, as you work through your main points, I want you to follow a pretty simple pattern here too. You make a claim, you back it up with evidence, and you give us reasoning for that claim, or reasoning that helps the audience understand why. Now, we can claim literally anything we want, and that's led to a very interesting rise in what some political pundits in our country are now calling alternative facts. But for instance, the Emmys were this last weekend, and I could claim anything I want about the Emmys. I should say Vin Diesel should have won the Emmy for Best Actor. Great. Vin Diesel wasn't actually in any television shows, but I could still make that claim. In fact, I can make any claim about Vin Diesel in the Emmys I want. He should have won all the Emmys. Set design, sound design, writing, directing. The guy's amazing. The problem comes up with when we don't provide any evidence to that. So after you make a claim, you've got to back it up with some evidence. It's got to be evidence that our audience can trust. And here's a little bit of that. The Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, the Wisconsin DNR, explains that in the 1920s, overfishing on Lake Michigan quickly depleted the game fish population of our Great Lake. This is a fact. We have a ton of evidence to support it. And the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources is a source that all of us should trust. All of us should believe. Because they are quite reputable, it's a state-run organization, they don't work with a lot of bias. So we need to find sources, and we'll talk about sources more definitely next week, but we need to find sources that our audience will believe. So that's going to rule out a lot of blog posts, unless it's by reputable news reporters, people with great expertise. It rules out basically, what your friends post on Facebook, things of that nature. But again, we'll talk about that more in depthly next week. But just as important, and actually, I shouldn't say just as important, I should say more important than that citation is the reasoning portion. And this is where we really get to talk to our audience. We really get to say why something is important to our audience. And it's your responsibility as a speaker to understand the audience you're speaking to and why they should care about that claim you made. So I've given you the claim. We lost a lot of fish. I've given you a citation, proves that. Now I have to explain why that should matter to you. Well, for one, we lost the ability to feed thousands of people. Literally tens of thousands, if not hundreds. In addition, we lost revenue from tourism and fishing. Without fish in the lake, people don't come into camp here and go out to fish and buy temporary fishing licenses, spending money at hotels, campgrounds, at different eateries around the state. Our commercial fisheries ran dry, and we stopped getting tax money from those commercial fisheries. And we also lost sport fishing. And now I know not all of you are into sport fishing, but there's a number, like you probably know somebody who enjoys going out and spending time on the water with their friends and family, and relaxing in that way. I happen to be one of those people here in the next few weeks as the salmon start to run up our river here. Myself and many other people will be out here in waders fishing for salmon. My wife among them. We enjoy that a great deal, and without having that time to relax, well, you're going to be a little more stressed out and got a little less of a revenue stream. You can hear some geese honking here in the back. They're very interested in outlining, of course. Shh, we're learning. And this is just a bare bones version of what your first main point will look like. You're going to need probably, in a 5-minute speech, you need 1.5 to 2 minutes worth of material to discuss there. And then we have a second main point. This is one of your tasks this week. That is, what is the community doing to help solve this issue? Well, the state of Wisconsin is helping to restock the Great Lake. And I've made that claim. Now I've got to back it up with evidence, and that's pretty easy to do. There's a ton of evidence talking about what we're doing. And here is a little bit of it. Dan O'Keefe of Michigan State University, professor of Great Lakes Fisheries Education and Management, explains that in the 1960s, a successful stocking program began to introduce different trout species and Pacific salmon to Lake Michigan. That's great. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, that's Michigan. But Dan O'Keefe does work with Wisconsin DNR. Our geese are taking off. You might be able to see them in the background. Dan O'Keefe does work with the Wisconsin DNR on this. And we have different stocking stations all throughout our state where we're growing small fry fish into larger fish and then releasing them into the lake. And at this point in time here, now 40 years later, they've begun to become self-reliant. They swim up this river a couple times a year, the trout in the spring, the salmon in the fall. They lay eggs, and they are repopulating our lake with these great fish. So we have another claim. We have some evidence for that claim. And then we have to go and we've got to do some reasoning. Well, here it is. Returning these fish helps to improve tourism, helps to improve our state income, helps feed people. Because as people come back for the tourism to go and fish for these great animals, they're spending a lot of money as they work through the state. They've got to buy fishing licenses, which go back right into the Wisconsin DNR and help to continue to populate the lake. They are spending money on food, tackle, bait, places to stay. They're buying boats and going out into our waterways, and all that money cycles through our revenue stream, goes into our state budget, And that matters to you as students because 30% of the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee budget actually comes from taxes right here in the state of Wisconsin. And without these great revenue streams, we're not going to have as many taxes that we're collecting here in the state, and your tuition will actually go up. And now I have a squirrel jumping towards me. We're going to turn that around really quick so you can see my new friend here. There we go. How you doing, buddy? Not part of our lesson plan, but I think that's worth checking out real quick. Man, very cool. How you doing? See, all animals are interested in learning about speech communication. Geese, ducks, squirrels, and students, which is a whole other animal unto itself. So we work through claim, evidence, and reasoning, and both are main points. And the reasoning is probably the most important thing there. It's where you take that time and adapt the message to your audience. After you've done this, if you would like, you can give the audience a way to help make a difference themselves. I'm going to do that for you right now, actually. Coming up here on September the 30th, the end of this month that we're in right now, is Sturgeon Fest. Sturgeon Fest is a festival that the Wisconsin DNR and our state puts on to help repopulate our state with our waterways with sturgeon, which is the largest natural fish in our waterways. Sturgeons are gigantic fish. They become several hundred pounds, 7 to 10 feet long. You can see them at a lot of zoos and aquariums throughout the state, and they are natural to our lakes and waterways. But they ended up dying out quite. We lost a colossal percentage of our sturgeon population due to them getting stuck in nets, people catching them for their roe, caviar, and now we have an opportunity to help make a difference ourselves. So each year Sturgeon Fest happens down at Lake Park, pretty close to the university. For $10 you can go down and they will hand you a bucket with a fish in it, a 10 to 14 inch sturgeon, and you get to go down and release that into the lake yourself. 10 years later, that fish will reach sexual maturity, and we'll see them swimming up rivers just like this, laying eggs and helping to repopulate our waterways with this colossal and amazing fish. And if you're interested in doing that, I'll probably be there myself. Let me know. I'm happy to hang out with you that day, talk about speech communication and what we can do to help our waterways. And that's something that you can make a difference with in this particular problem. So, back to our task this week. So your directions again, and I'll write this out below here too, is to go back, grab your 2 problems, plug them into this week's discussion for your initial post, and go find out what the community is doing to help solve that problem. Hold on to that citation where you got that information from, because you're going to be able to use that in your speech when we start writing them here this next week. And then in your responses, folks, please let your classmates know, does this relate to them? Or does this relate to you? Do you care? Is it interesting? Is it something that you're glad is happening? And if you know of some other resource that your classmate can use, please send that to them. Like, plug it into your response. Help us make better speeches. All right, now, good luck, folks. I will see you on the discussion boards this week. I'm going to go get set up and record our second video for the week.